you everyone so much for joining today's webinar or virtual town hall. And tonight's town hall is entitled Teach My History, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Practice. So thank you all so much for joining. We have a really great lineup tonight, some very special speakers, many of my colleagues who I'm so honored to be able to work alongside, and we're very, very excited to have our keynote speaker, special guest Stacey Abrams. And so, we are all here because we are all facing this challenging time where many of our basic freedoms and rights and norms are under attack. And during this time, it's so important that we continue to lift up our core values, which are diversity, equity, and inclusion, and recognizing the importance of these values as a part of the American dream. And so to kick things off with some welcoming remarks, I'm going to hand things over to Representative Mai Zong from the Asian Pacific American Legislative Caucus.
Thank you, Senator Chang. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm so excited and honored to be here tonight. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And I also want to welcome our honorable guest and keynote speaker, Stacey Abrams. Thank you for joining us. Really excited to hear from you. I am co-chairs with Senator Chang in the APA Legislative Caucus. And I also recently co-sponsored the legislation that we're going to be discussing tonight. I want to thank my colleagues in the House and the Senate for working on this legislation, which is really important. As a mom with 4 young children in our public school systems, I know firsthand how important it is for us to be able to teach our history and heritage, not just to my children, but their classmates as well. I represent the 13th House District in Macomb County, the communities of Warren, Roosevelt, and St. Clair Shores, and very diverse communities. And I know that my constituents would be really excited to learn about other cultures, especially during a time like now, as Senator Chang mentioned. Things are just very polarizing. I think education is very important for people to understand different cultures and where each of us came from, because we each have a unique experience, and those stories really need to be elevated. They need to be shared. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get this legislation across the finish line to make sure that this becomes a statewide initiative. Other states have implemented this. In particular, I know, like in Minnesota, where there's a huge Hmong community, they have classes that are dedicated to language, and these are public schools. And in Wisconsin, they recently passed legislation that would require teaching Hmong history in public schools. And as someone of Hmong descent, I think that it's really phenomenal, and Michigan should certainly follow suit in that. So, looking forward to championing that legislation, but also addressing other issues that impact the different various communities in our legislative caucus.
Thank you so much, Representative. Next, I'm going to hand it to Representative Amos O'Neill, who is the chair of the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus.
Thank you, Senator, and special guest Stacey Abrams. Thank you for being here and welcome. I'm Amos O'Neill, state rep for the 94th district, which includes Saginaw County area. We're like 35 miles north of Flint, if you can relate to that. I am the current chair of the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus. And as you know, Michigan has been a beacon of hope and beacon of just prosperity for a lot of Black Americans throughout our history. From the Underground Railroad to Motown, we take pride in the cultural contributions we've made to the state and to our country. As chair of Michigan Legislative Black Caucus, I believe it's very important that we continue our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in Michigan during a time when others are trying to rewrite or even flat out remove our history from the books. It's very important now more than ever, as this is a historic time for all of us, so important more now than ever that we not shy away from talking about the contributions and the challenges that we're facing, particularly in marginalized communities in Michigan. The Michigan Legislative Black Caucus stands ready and willing and able to fight against the diversity, equity, inclusion onslaught. Just today, Madam Stacey Abrams, we had a press conference and to support our third Black Michigan State Colonel for the Michigan State Police here. Colonel Grady is being attacked unduly, unjustifiable. He has 27 years of stellar service as the chief law enforcement officer for the state of Michigan. So we stood shoulder to shoulder, advocating and fighting and speaking out against the attack on him. And so it's fitting that Teach Michigan History bill package, which you'll hear more about today, will ensure that not only the history of Black Michiganders is not forgotten, but all history for our collective cultural diversity as we are unified and stronger together when we are linked like we are. So it's time for us to take one more step to make our perfect union perfect for our next generation of leaders. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much. And up next, we're going to hear from Senator Mary Cavanaugh, who chairs the Michigan Latino Legislative Caucus.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about our keynote speaker, Stacey Abrams, to be here, and just to be here, and everyone online taking your time out just to hear a little bit about what's going on and how important it is. So again, my name is Mary Cavanaugh. I'm the state senator for Michigan's 6th Senate District. So that's going to include a large portion of Northwest Detroit, Redford Township, Livonia, Farmington, and Farmington Hills. I also chair the Legislative Latino Caucus. I'm a first-generation Mexican-American immigrant, and I'm the youngest woman to ever be elected into the Michigan State Senate. So it's an honor to be with everyone here tonight. And I think it's really, really important, the topic that we're talking about. And even I thank Senator Chang for offering even the Latino Caucus some space for this conversation, especially with what's going on across the country. And especially, I really want to share this story about just myself as a young Latina and as someone who has struggled with not seeing myself or my background reflected in multiple ways, especially moving from San Diego to Michigan. I really know the importance of cultural diversity within our education system. So the Latino makes up about 5% of Michigan's population and one of the largest growing. Yet far too often our histories are not included in the curriculum and our voices are not heard in the rooms where decisions are made. When I was about 5 years old, I said my family picked up and moved from San Diego to Detroit. And in one instance, we were told to stop speaking Spanish, stray away from our bright colors, waited almost 30 years to proudly wear my hair in braids. And also my mother, it was generational, was also disciplined to speak English at a very young age and spent her childhood learning how to get rid of her accent because accent brought barriers that didn't exist to others, or staying too long in the sun hindered opportunities I had. I learned to hide because it was more beneficial to conform than to stand out. And so I bring all of this up because growing up here with a curriculum that didn't reflect at least my story or the stories of my ancestors really contributed to the growing shame of identity that we're seeing amongst our young people and even our communities. If I had felt as though my history and culture made up the chapters rather than just simple footnotes, I may have embraced my Mexican heritage or rather myself a little bit earlier in life. So this isn't just about curriculum, it's about hearing and seeing and accurately reflecting communities because representation matters. And so I do think when we teach inclusive history, we empower students to see themselves in the narrative, fostering belonging so many people of color are not afforded. And I do think that diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just political buzzwords, but the pillars we build most of our communities and all of our empathetic and all of our empathy from. And so I think every single one of our communities, it's not a melting pot, but a mosaic. And so I just wanted to share my story a little bit and thank the sponsors and also thank a little bit of time of allowing me to speak and show that representation really, really matters. And what you guys are doing and pushing this legislation, especially now, is very, very important to communities like mine.
Thank you so much, Senator Cavanaugh, and thank you for sharing a bit of your personal perspective. Similarly, growing up in Metro Detroit, I think about the fact that I didn't learn about anything about Asian American history until I had a mentor teacher of mine who was the advisor of our Asian American student organization. And he was the one who really opened my eyes to Asian American history and gave me Helen Zia's Asian American Dreams book, and being able to read our community's history and put together the puzzle pieces of why certain things were the things that my family had experienced really gave me a stronger sense of my own identity. And I think really is a big reason why I set out on the path that led me to organizing and really fighting for social justice. So in addition to being a daughter of immigrants, I'm also a mom of two kids, a 9-year-old and a just recently turned 6-year-old who is standing right next to me. And I really want to make sure that by the time they are in high school or maybe even middle school, that they are learning Asian American history and the histories of every community of color, not just from me, not just from a mentor teacher, but in their classroom. And so in 2020, during COVID, we saw this huge wave of anti-Asian hate. And I remember some of the conversations in the wake of the spa shooting in Georgia, where there were parents and community leaders who were all starting to have conversations with one another and with me about why aren't our kids learning anything about our history in schools? And what if they had learned this? And what if as adults we had learned everyone's histories in our schools? Maybe there would be less hate. Maybe there would be less hate crimes and hate incidents that our community has unfortunately experienced, and many of our communities represented on this Zoom have experienced. And so those conversations led a number of us on this call to really think about, well, let's fight for our teaching Asian American history in schools, but let's actually also fight for all of our histories. Good job. And so, there has been a really exciting wave of state after state that has passed legislation requiring the teaching of Asian American history, including Illinois, Rhode Island, Florida, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware. And in Michigan, again, we have been very intentional about being multiracial because we really are all in this together. And so we're very excited for that. We have reintroduced legislation this week in both the House and Senate to do just that. And so it's Senate Bills 453 through 455 and House Bills 4687 through 4689. And so what these bills will do is, beginning with the 2027 school year, require each school board to ensure that one unit of instruction of age and grade appropriate instruction regarding Black, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Latino and Hispanic, Indigenous, Middle Eastern, North African, Jewish, and European American history is incorporated into the history curriculum provided in that district. And we want to make sure that that history that is taught talks about the contributions made by these communities, past policies that were discriminatory against these communities, as well as contributions towards advancing civil rights. In addition, one of the bills makes sure that we are equipping our teachers with the tools and the training that they need, knowing that we want to make sure that this type of curriculum is delivered in an appropriate way. And so that professional development piece is so important. And then thirdly, we also include in this bill package a cultural history advisory board within the Department of Education that is representative of communities of color as well as the education community, recognizing that we want to make sure that if we are able to get these bills passed, that there are the experts and the community leaders that are in place to really advise the Department of Education on making sure that we are truly delivering the solutions that we are aiming to do. So I'm very excited about these bills, and I think that we're in this time, as we've alluded to, that really remind us how important it is that we continue to lift up the histories of communities of color, and in particular to think about the lessons that we should have been learning to ensure that certain types of history are not repeated again. So up next, I'm going to introduce Representative Hoskins, who is our wonderful partner in the House on this bill package.
Thank you, Senator Chang. And it's been such a pleasure being able to work with you on this package. I am so excited about the work that we're going to be able to potentially do with this because it is so important that we are protecting our future, protecting our history, making sure that we are not being erased. Yeah, I think that history is a lot more than just dates and facts. History is the story we tell about who we are as a people, as a community, as a nation. And for far too long, that story has been incomplete. Too often, we leave out those voices and contributions and experiences of so many communities of color who built this country alongside others. And so that's why it's so important that we are pushing forward on these bills. When our children don't see themselves reflected in what they're learning, they receive this unintended message that their stories don't matter, that their heritage isn't valued, that they are less than. And of course, that's not only wrong, but also very harmful to students as they are going through school. It chips away at their confidence, their sense of belonging, and their hope for what they can achieve. So with this legislation, creating this inclusive and multiracial history curriculum, I think it is going to be so important to so many children in our state. It's going to ensure that every child, no matter their background, can walk into a classroom and find pieces of them, pieces of their own identity in the lessons that are being taught. It means teaching the full truth, the struggles, the pain, but also those triumphs and the resilience of so many marginalized communities. And it also means fostering empathy and understanding and respect between students from all walks of life. I'm really excited about what we're going to be able to do with this legislation, and I'm hoping we can get it through and past the finish line this term. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Representative Hoskins. We're so excited that the bills have been reintroduced, and we've got a long road ahead, but we're in this fight to make it happen. So up next, we're going to hear from our very special guest. You all are probably familiar already with much of her work, but she is the former minority leader in the Georgia House. She's a lawyer, she's an activist, she's an author, and you may not know this, but she is also the founder of American Pride Rises, which is one of the partners on this Zoom town hall tonight. And so Stacey Abrams is here as our keynote speaker, and we're so excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you to the senators and the representatives and all of the attendees. I founded American Pride Rises in 2023 after the Students for Fair Admissions decision. I did so in part because I was hearing stories about the demise of DEI, but the evidence of my eyes said that wasn't what was happening. But it was what was taking over the narrative, taking over the headlines, because it's a lot more fun to write a man bites dog story than the dog bites man story that's the truth about DEI. But what that led me to is to really think about, why is DEI so important? And I began thinking about the American dream, and I think Senator Chang, you mentioned it. The American dream has three pathways. It's the economy, what we do, it's elections, who's in charge, but it's also education. It's what we know. And in this country, the strongest pathway is to begin with a foundation of knowledge. Education is the precursor to every other step because it determines what our economy looks like. It helps us decide who's going to lead us. And if we fail our children in their education, we are setting them up for failure long term. But if we get this right, the world changes, not just for those students, but for everyone. And that's why this moment is so critical, and this fight is so critical, and this legislative package is so important. I had the honor of serving as the minority leader in the Georgia House for 7 years. I was a member of the legislature for 11 years. And during that time, I understood extraordinarily well how important it is to have our state leaders speak up, to have them stand in the gap, and to have them show the rest of the state how critical their voices are. And there has never been a time, I would argue, as fraught as this moment when it comes to the future of our nation in at least the last century. Because we are in the midst of a tyrannical takeover, the rise of autocracy, and this is not hyperbole. And I'm going to prove it. You see, there's a 10-step plan for tyranny to take hold, for autocracy to win, for the restoration of this idea that we need strong men to lead us as opposed to the people leading themselves. And it starts with winning elections that are free and fair, at least that time. But then you immediately move to the systematic dismantling of checks on executive power, and worse, an expansion of executive power that goes unchecked. Third, there is the capture of the legislative branch that becomes complicit, and there is the neutering of the courts, which make them irrelevant. It's when we start to dismantle the other two branches of government, or at least make their persistence almost negligible. Step 4, you upend the civil service. You gut the people who know how to do the work. You fire them unceremoniously until you realize we don't have anyone who knows where the nuclear weapons are. We don't have anyone to help us with vaccines. You gut the civil service because you only want to leave in place those who do not like what government does. Because when you can do that, you can start to shake the faith of the people. When people need help and can't get it from their government, they forget that those folks were fired and they only remember that they couldn't be served. Step 5 is that you start to ensure that the key positions, the prosecutors, like the head of the DOJ, the tax enforcement, like the head of the IRS, the law enforcement, the head of the FBI, the military, DHS and DOD, the intelligence services, you replace the leaders not with loyalists to your party, but with people who have fealty only to the person in charge. Because when that happens, they are not bound by the Constitution that binds us as a nation. They are only bound to the power that they see in those muscle positions and in the strong man who's in charge. Step 6, you delegitimize critical media. You sue the television stations. You isolate news reporters. And then you construct an information echo chamber that only sells your propaganda and dismisses anything else as not only untrue, but un-American. Once you've done those 6 steps, then there's step 7. And step 7 is you got to blame somebody. Because if you have gutted government, if you've put loyalists who are often incapable of actually doing their jobs in power, if you've taken away the truth, someone has to be at fault when things start to fall apart. And that's when you demonize the marginalized and the disadvantaged. That's when you look to people of color and to those who are disabled. That's when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you blame it for all things that have gone wrong. And we've watched that happen in the last year. We've watched that bubble up for the last 3 years, but it really took hold in January. And the reason you demonize DEI, the reason you talk about it with such invective is because if it works, then America works. You cannot take power from those who believe they are entitled to power, and there is no community more willing to fight for power, as Representative O'Neill said, than the people who have been at the boot of power. And so they will demonize DEI because it's the best way to take hold. And once you've done that, once you've demonized these communities, once you've stolen our history, once you've told lies about who we are, once you've kidnapped our people from the streets, once you've taken away our sense of self, it makes it a lot easier to move to step 8, which is harassing the opposition, harassing the civil sector by threatening them, harassing the legal industry by telling them that they can't take the cases they need to take, and through threatening to defund everything that makes this country work. At step 9, we saw it unfold recently in California. You encourage militia violence. You upend our sense of self and sense of safety. You justify state-sanctioned violent reaction as a means of convincing us that it's not worth fighting back. And if you've successfully done steps 1 through 9, step 10 is easiest to do, and that is make sure that there are never elections that you lose again. I walk through this litany, this road to tyranny, because it comes back to something that Andrew Breitbart said, and I hate quoting him, but he was right. He said politics is downstream of culture. The translation then is if you can change culture, you can change government. If you can dismantle and dismiss and erase culture, you can erase the power of the people. And DEI is step 7 because DEI is culture. It's humanity. It is the future. And that is why this legislation is so important, because it is through this legislation that we remind ourselves of who we are and how we got here. Because DEI is not, as some would dismiss it, it's not a boring HR seminar. It's not a failed set of policies. It is the history of America. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, these are DEI laws. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that's DEI. The existence of Title I of elementary and secondary education, the creation of the Department of Education was a DEI act for rural students, for poor students, for girls who needed an education. It was the embodiment of DEI. Title IX, which prohibits sex discrimination in education, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and the Davis-Bacon Act that made being unionized possible in this country were DEI laws because labor rights are human rights. The Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act, the Immigration and Nationalization Act are DEI acts because it said that America belonged to anyone willing to work to be here and work to stay here. The Family Medical Leave Act let women take control of their bodies and their families, along with Roe v. Wade. The Americans with Disabilities Act took until 1990 for us to understand that people had the right to dignity even if they were disabled. And the Respect for Marriage Act said that no matter who you love, your love is sacred and valid. DEI is how we made America what it is. DEI has been around for 249 years. It started with a revolution that said that the right to your religion was going to be the core of who we are. And so when they say they want to erase our history, they're simply starting with communities of color, but they're coming after everyone. But we can win if we refuse to let them strip us of our culture, strip us of our humanity. If we remember that what they like to call the culture wars is an attempt to convince us that we're not worth the fight. But they know what we forget too often, that if you can demonize our language, you can convince us that our stories aren't true. If you can litigate us out of existence, then you can tell us the laws aren't for us. And if you can legislate into place the narrative that it was never so, we will forget who we are. And you've now changed the culture, you've changed the government, and you've changed the future. But I'm so excited to be with you tonight because I'm here to talk about how we fight back and, more importantly, how we win. First and foremost, we speak up. We pass the Teach Michigan History package. This package is a repudiation of the rise of tyranny in this country. And for those who would say it's not that big a deal, it is exactly the point. If you remember what happened in January, the very first executive orders issued were to tell us that DEI is wrong. You don't fight so hard and prioritize something that doesn't matter. They did it not because they were afraid that it wasn't working. It was because it was working too well. We have the most diverse nation, not only in our history, but in the history of the world. And that diversity should be celebrated. That equity, that fair access to opportunity should be lifted up because our children need to know that they have the right to more. And inclusion says that no matter who you are or whose you are ours. And that happens when we teach our history, and Michigan will be the point of the spear, teaching not only the history of Michigan, but the history of America. And so our first job is to speak up. Our next job is to stand firm. And that is why I'm so excited about the role that APR can play as a partner in this work, as a supporter of this work. Because we have to tell Michiganders what's at stake. They think that this might just be about what a child is learning in second grade. No, this is about what Americans understand about who we are and what we believe. And that's why I encourage us to continue to find allies. There's nothing more amazing to me than the coalition on this screen, because you've already found allies who may not agree on everything, but you agree on this thing. And our next job is to then embolden believers, because even if they don't believe that they are part of DEI, it's our job to tell them that if you want the ability to take off time to take care of your loved ones, that's the Family Medical Leave Act. And when they say they're opposed to DEI, they mean you. That sex discrimination isn't permissible, that removing opportunities for those who are disabled should be anathema. That happens when we show up. And finally, if we are willing to speak up and stand firm, the last thing we can do, the most important thing that this legislation can and will do, is it will show America what's possible. I live in Georgia. I am so proud of my state, but I spend a lot of time talking about Michigan. This is a state that can change the future, and you already have. Passing this package isn't simply about defending DEI in education. It's not just about stopping the banning of books and the banning of stories. It's about winning back who we are and reminding Americans that this is our country, that we built it through immigrant labor, through slave labor. We built it on the backs of women who were ignored and Native Americans who were denied, that the AAPI community, when they came to this country, were told that they could not own property, could only build the properties that we wanted. When we tell the story of Michigan, we tell the story of America, and then we write the future. And so I'm so excited to be here with you to help you speak up, stand firm, and show America what's possible.
Well, thank you so much. That was very inspiring. And just as you mentioned that you're sort of watching what's happening in Michigan, we are all certainly always watching what's happening in Georgia as well. Thank you so much for your inspiring words, as well as your continued leadership over many years. To everyone who is on, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A portal. And I know we've got a couple questions in already. So just a reminder to put those questions in. And then up next, we are going to hear from Representative Pais, who is one of the bill sponsors on the package.
Excuse me. Thank you, Senator Chang. And yes, I'm Veronica Pais. I'm a state rep for House District 10, which is Harper Woods, Five Girls Point communities in the east side of Detroit, which is a very socioeconomically diverse district. And thank you, Ms. Abrams, for taking the time to share with us the importance of diversity and inclusion and the equity and the role each of us can play in recognizing the diversity and importance in each of us. And in recognizing that we need to lead and to lead to teach, to respect who we are in ourselves. I'm so thankful to be a part of this 3-bill package along with Rep. Hoskins and Senator Chang. And Rep. Kozar, who isn't here at the moment. I'm proud to be a sponsor of House Bill 4689. My bill would establish a Cultural History Advisory Board. And having been a member of numerous advisory boards, I understand the importance of having a large range of perspectives and opinions. As a second-generation American Latina, Latina, and former vice chair of the Michigan Democratic Party, I can tell you, Michigan Democratic Hispanic Latino Caucus, rather. I can tell you that I've heard voices from throughout the state. I'm the granddaughter of a Mexican immigrant who was left at the border as a child. He raised himself. He met my grandmother when they were both working on a cotton farm. He grew up to own grocery stores to help out his community. My uncles all served in wars. So similar to Senator Kavanaugh, our families have had a lot of various experiences. Also, when my family moved to Michigan in the 60s, we also had to give up our language to assimilate, to change who we are, and essentially to purposely negate our families and ourselves. When I was in high school, which was a while ago, many of my fellow students were immigrants and first or second generation Mexicans, Greeks, Germans, Italians, Cubans, and others. I believe that all of our histories need to be recognized in our children's education and to acknowledge the importance of all of our experiences and all of our histories in Michigan and as well as throughout the country. I think this package of bills will ensure that all of our histories are given time in the classroom so that our future generations can have a really well-rounded knowledge of who we are within ourselves, who we are within our histories, and to and to who we are as a group, trying to make our children better, make ourselves better, and just make our country inclusive and recognizing us as both individuals and as cultures, not just who we were, but also who we are today, that we're so much more than stereotypical expectations of ourselves. So thank you so much. I really thank you for your support of our work. And I look forward to hearing some feedback from everybody.
Thank you so much, Representative. And then our last speaker for the evening before we get to questions and answers. And as a reminder, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A for any of us that are on here, including our keynote speaker. But our final speaker is Emily Nguyen, who is with Rising Voices.
Hi everyone, my name, as Senator Chang mentioned, is Emily Nguyen. I'm the Policy Director at Rising Voices. For those who may not know, Rising Voices is an organization focusing on advocating for Asian American women, families, and children to build collective community power. I did want to mention I'm here representing today the Teach Michigan History Coalition, which was formed in 2023 to support the Teach Michigan History bill package, and it is made up of students, parents, educators, advocates, and advocacy organizations all across Michigan. So I've heard a lot of stories from senators and representatives sharing the personal stories. Wanted to share mine that I grew up in a very rural town, so when I went to school, didn't get to really learn about Asian American history really at all. It wasn't until I had my first job interning with Senator Stephanie Chang where I really got involved with the Asian American community and learned that there's actually so much history just rooted in the state of Michigan about Asian Americans that I did not have the chance to learn. And I think that would have helped build up my confidence and understanding. Like, no idea that in the 1930s there was a Chinatown in Detroit. I always thought that it was so random that my parents picked to live in the state of Michigan, and felt like I needed to go out west to see more people who looked like me, and just have like the sense of culture. But we actually have a community in Michigan, and I really wish I had learned that. So that is personally why the Teach Michigan History bill package is super important to me, as well as the coalition members. So I wanted to share how everyone can get involved to help this effort from the community advocacy side. So wanted to share that Rising Voices does have a petition encouraging our state senators and state representatives to advocate and push for the Teach Michigan History bill package. I'll drop the link in the chat for anyone who would like to sign on. The other important part to remember is that Michigan is a local control state when it comes to our schools. So Rising Voices and the Teach Michigan History Coalition will actually be spending this summer into fall attending and building relationships with our school board members to ask them to support this package, both through advocacy but also passing resolutions in support. So if you would like to join us, I will also drop my contact information so that you can coordinate with us how you would like to connect with your school board members. And in addition to that, we are hoping for a hearing sometime in the fall, at least in the Senate. So we'll be planning an advocacy day around that. If you'd like to join, I will also drop the information on how to contact me and do that. I'll pass it back to Senator Chang.
Thank you so much. Representative Pais has an additional comment, and then we're going to open up some Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Senator Chang. And thank you, Emily. You prompted me to think about something that's really been concerning me and which I think this legislation is responding to. Back in the 1920s and 30s, there was what was called a repatriation movement of Mexicans, including American citizens of Mexicans and Latino heritage, being deported to Mexico. There's even, can't recall the name of the town, but there's a small town in Mexico that has grown out of the American citizens who were sent there and stayed there. I see this happening so much now, where I really hate to use the word deportation because they're not actually deporting people, they're taking them and sending them to wherever the hell they want. With all this fear mongering going on amongst or aimed at each of our cultures, I have a particular sensitivity at the moment to my fellow Latinos who are being harassed, assaulted, rounded up. And I see this as really, really something that's starting to be on a par with what was going on with 1920s and 30s, which you would think 100 years later or 90 years later would be over. But this seems much more assaultive to me. And I don't like to say that I'm scared because I'm actually just really pissed off and angry about it. But it's concerning. And I think this package will go far in educating people about not just that history, but in educating people about who we are so that they don't have this fear or preconceived ideas of who we are. You know, that in my case, my family's case, that we're all not like rapists and drug users or what have you. So I think this package will do is a lot stronger than just what we would normally consider just opening your history books in school. It goes a long way. I know Rep. Song has her story. I know Rep. Chang or Senator Chang has hers. There's all of us here with a story, with a really important one that isn't reflected in even the basic education that we're getting right now in this. Anyway, thank you for letting me speak. This is just really important for me to say it at this moment. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. And I think when we're talking about learning our history and making sure that we're not repeating it, you shining a light on things that happened many, many decades ago. Unfortunately, it's a really important example of how important it is that we are teaching all of our children this history. So thank you for that.